The best way to learn a language? Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. For instance, I've been using Babbel's convenient courses to help me learn basic conversational skills in German while I'm getting ready for a little trip I'm planning. It's not a language I'd ever studied before, but I find the lessons really easy and kind of like hand-holding me through learning a completely new language to me. And it's reassuring to know that with the help of Babbel, I'll be able to greet people, order food, and ask for directions without having to consult language apps while I'm in Deutschland. I'm still learning. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, a founder of the Go Kid Go network. At Go Kid Go, putting kids first is at the heart of every show that we produce. That's why we're so excited to introduce a brand new show to our network called The Search for the Silver Lining, a fantasy adventure series about a spirited young girl named Isla who time travels to the mythical land of Camelot. Look for The Search for the Silver Lining on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and this is part three of our discussion of the life and legacy of Catherine de' Medici. So this is part of the ongoing theme for this season, which is There's Something About Mary, Queen of Scots, where we're kind of circling around the story of Mary, Queen of Scots. And it's a really complex story, and we really needed to explain stuff that we've done before about her grandmother, Margaret Tudor, about her mother, Marie de Guise, and then this week, her mother-in-law, Catherine de' Medici. Like, what they all did really affects sort of the world that Mary, Queen of Scots was born into and what happened to her. Anyway, in this episode, we're going to conclude the story of Catherine de' Medici. So if you haven't listened to Vulgar History before, we're not going to recap the previous two episodes because it's a podcast. Like, if you want to know where we're coming from, you could just like go back and wherever you're listening to this and listen to part 1 and 2 to get ready for part 3, because this is the big conclusion. This is where we're going to score Catherine de' Medici, one of the biggest names we've ever done on this podcast, on the Fredegund Memorial Scandilicous Scale. So without further ado, here is myself and Lanawa Johnson talking about Catherine de' Medici. So yeah, that is a thing that happened. And then 2 years later, Charles died, aged 23. So he had been king for 10 plus years.
Sorry. Yes, Calvin is French.
Oh, so Calvin...
He was a French Huguenot.
Okay. So that's Protestantism spreading. So Charles dies. Age 23, he was ill a lot. Some of it was probably like syphilis related, because he had various mistresses, but he didn't have any legitimate children. And so the next king of France became Catherine's next oldest son, who is also called Henry. And he had been recently named King of Poland. Why? Not sure. Just to give him a job, I guess. And Henry was Catherine's favorite.
They had an election and he won.
Oh, and it was a fair election?
According to Catherine. Catherine felt it was a very fair election.
So this is the third king of France who died unexpectedly young, right? Like if Catherine's husband had lived longer, things would be different. If Francis had lived longer, like they just keep dying unexpectedly early and Catherine has to pivot. But here's the thing. for her, I think she might have been a bit happy because Henry was her favorite because he was strong and handsome, effective in battle, completely devoted to her, maybe a cross-dresser.
Completely incapable of having children.
Yeah. Big queer vibes on this guy. So he becomes king, but here's the thing. So he is king, but he is an adult man. He's not a child. So it's kind of like, well, he doesn't need a regent because he is an adult. But Catherine is like, I'm basically still in charge.
Well, and he was very much a mama's boy.
Well, exactly. He happily let her be in charge. And he wasn't super interested in like king stuff. He was interested in like looking like a king, having like his portrait painted where he looked good.
And having all the money.
And having really, really hot men around him all the time. So Catherine was in charge of mostly everything. Like, actually, but he was the king. And this is why she raised her children to be utterly dependent on her, because she didn't want him to have a mind of his own. She wanted to be in charge, like to continue being in charge.
She liked this and encouraged this in him. He was her baby.
Yeah. It was a real, mama's boy situation. So she wanted him to marry a foreign royal princess, but instead he married a commoner, which is like the one rebellious thing he ever did that Catherine didn't like. They did not have any children. Lena just said he was incapable of having children, which is for whatever reason. Maybe he had the weird shaped dick also, and no Deanne around to suggest positions, whatever.
I don't think there was any evidence of him ever having an affair, though. Like, I don't think he had any mistresses or anything.
He just did not have a sex drive?
Well, he may have been asexual. He may have been gay. He may have just been not down for it. But yeah, there's like not really any big evidence. He picked his wife up on the way to Poland.
He's just like, you there. I need a wife. You're female. Yeah.
At that time, Catherine didn't really care. Like, she wanted to marry him up, but he was going to be a king. So she's like, I've got Charles. Charles is fine. You're too far away for me to do too much about it. So like he grabbed a wife on the way while his mom couldn't do much about it.
Yeah. So he's a spare. It's interesting what you're describing. So like he didn't have children, whatever. Maybe like physiologically he wasn't able to or whatever, emotionally, whatever. But in the movie Queen Margot, he is an extremely sexual character. He is fucking everybody in that movie. He's fucking his sister. He's fucking everybody in that movie. He looks like Mick Jagger.
And that's Bourbon Valois propaganda, like Bourbon anti-Valois propaganda.
For sure. So that's the thing. So like
why that's happening.
So like just to say again, so Catherine's all of her children are Valois. Like that's the dynasty she married into. That was her husband Henry. And eventually, after all this happens, for reasons we'll explain, well, basically because none of her children had children, the next king of France becomes Margot's husband, Henry. And that's the Bourbon dynasty begins. And when the Bourbon dynasty begins, it's in their best interest to be like the Valois were monsters and terrible and don't support anyone who supports them, support us now. Like, so they wrote propaganda saying Catherine was a witch and, this evil Disney villainess and she caused all these massacres and her husband or her son was like gay or maybe a crossdresser, or I think he was a crossdresser. If that's what it would be called. Like, I think it's known that he did wear women's clothes. Anyway, so they were bad-mouthing her later on. And the movie Queen Margot is based on a book by Alexandre Dumas, which is based on this propaganda. And that's why the movie Queen Margot and the book is all just like, look at this family of people who all fuck each other.
Alexandre Dumas is the king of propaganda. Yeah. That was his job. He did it well.
He wrote so many books about French history.
About French history, in quotes.
True. And then, like so many other things in history, it's taken as like, well, I guess that's what really happened. It's like, oh, okay. So that's where it's like people who criticize rain, I'm just like, okay, but like people have been reimagining these stories since they happened, since Alexandre Dumas. Like this is not.
If you think I get into like all of this Deguise stuff, you should see me talk about people accepting Victorian version of history.
Yeah.
I start foaming at the mouth. I'm so mad.
It's everyone who's written history. And it's interesting. I've got some interviews, I think they may have already aired by the time this comes out, with some people who've written nonfiction books. And we talk about that, where it's just like, when you're looking at sources, it's like, okay, but who wrote this source and when? Like, was this written at the time these things happened? And if so, who wrote it? Or was this written 500 years later? And what was their point of view? And who are they trying to support? It's like, that's why I found it so just silly when I got that review of my podcast calling me biased, where it's like, okay, show me history that's not biased. You know, when people are like, that's inaccurate, it's like, okay, but like without a time machine, we're all just guessing.
I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of the white dude.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other places you can go for that.
Yeah, it's wild. Somebody on TikTok called me a misandrist, and I was like,
just because you don't like movies with men in them.
And I don't. And there's lots of people who don't like movies with women in them.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but yeah, so this is the thing. This is where like parsing out the actual story, or like trying to parse out the story of Catherine de Medici, like you have to wade through a lot of Bourbon propaganda that's being like, she was evil. And she was certainly a powerful woman. And we see that over and over again, where it's just like, ooh, a powerful woman, you know, needs to be described as evil, but especially if she was from Florence, and especially if she did successful things.
She was capable. She was a very capable woman.
Here's the thing, she was, and I love that, you know, her life started out, she was this orphan, she's kind of like shunted around, she became the wife of a man who didn't care about her. And then when he died, she was just like, guess what? I've been secretly amazing this whole time, and watch me go. And that's just what she did.
Well, and she didn't like, she was married to this man that didn't care about her. And she didn't go, oh, woe is me, let's stop it. She's like, okay, but we have to have kids. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to have children, up to and including asking your mistress for help. Like, whatever it takes, I'm going to do my job. And that's what she was. She's like, whatever it takes, I'm going to do it.
And it's sort of like, because she was from Florence, like her mother was French too, but similar-ish to how Margaret Tudor and then Marie de Guise wound up in Scotland. And they're both just like, well, I hate this place and everyone in it, but my job is to like be the queen of it. So I guess let's go. Like, it's like, that's my job. Yeah. Okay. I didn't choose it, but here we go. Catherine's like that with France, really.
Although she was a little bit more intentional about saying, oh, there's other people that are capable. Well, no, sorry. Doing it anyway.
Well, and by this point, so certainly by the Queen Margot era, like the Flying Squadron is just like firing on all cylinders. She's got her like sexy lady spies. They are out there. They are seducing men. They are bringing back secrets. Like
they're setting up men.
Exactly. Like she's got like a whole infrastructure of sneaky things happening. And she like, no one would dare try to tell her, Catherine, that she's not in charge or that she can't do something. Like she is built from the ground, like an entire structure that supports her being in charge, including her children being useless.
Uninterested in challenging their mother for any sort of power or influence.
So that being said, like this is not turning out the way she thought it would, because none of her sons are having children. So this is like challenging her whole like family dynasty. Let's take over all the countries in Europe. Like not happening, because
you have one job.
Here's the thing. She had one job and she figured out how to do it. Her children are just like, I guess I'm just not having any children. So
Elizabeth had children.
Oh, Elizabeth of Valois did.
She had 2 kids with Philip. Yep. They didn't inherit because obviously she was the third wife, but
so she's the only, those are her only grandkids. So, and we haven't
legitimate.
True. So she had one more son who was also named Francis. Francis also. Other Francis. So anyway, so what happened with other Francis, who, he's in the movie, Queen Margot. He's the little like weaselly guy who puts the poison on the book. So other Francis ends up allying with the Huguenots against his family and the crown. Like, Francis, what are you doing? So he did that. And then he died very young of tuberculosis. So,
because when in doubt, tuberculosis.
Yeah, we've talked about tuberculosis so much on this show this season. There's just been a lot of tuberculosis, but it was a disease a lot of people got and a lot of people lived with.
It was the popular royal disease until Victoria made everybody very sick.
What did Victoria make everybody very sick with?
She had a genetic predisposition, and now I've lost the word for it.
The bleeding thing.
Bleeding. Yeah. Sorry, I lose words.
No, I do too.
It's part of my brain.
The thing where you bleed easily.
Hemophilia,
yeah. Well, and then the thing with Victoria is she came in, she had a gazillion children. They all married into all the houses of Europe. So then every house of Europe had this predisposition to hemophilia because they were all cousins who all married each other.
Victoria did exactly what Catherine wanted to do.
Except Victoria's children, she procreated.
That's because Victoria procreated.
Yeah.
As much as humanly possible.
Well, she did. Yeah. And one day we are going to do so this asshole Victoria. But I was just telling my friend recently who is, she studies history of medicine. And I was talking about, she didn't know about this, how Victoria, she had so many children because she just like loved fucking her husband. But she hated being pregnant. She hated having children. She hated being a mother.
She hated children.
So when medication came out that you could be knocked out by, like anesthesia, she was just like, genius. So then her doctor, for her like final few children, they just like knocked her out. So, and then the baby was born and then she woke up and they're like, here's your baby. She's like, great. Like,
you take care of that for me. That's why I pay you.
Yeah. Which is also interesting to think like, wow, like, even if you're like completely unconscious, like the human body will still deliver a baby. But that's Victoria. And that's a story for another day. So if we're keeping track of Catherine's children, we have Elizabeth, who has now died in childbirth in Spain, to the heartbreak of her much older husband, Philip. We have Francis has died. Henry is now the king. Other Francis just died of tuberculosis. Margot still thriving. She hates her husband, but
and he's not fond of her.
They did not get along. So the new heir to the throne, like there's no Valois left. So the new heir to the throne is Margot's husband, Henry of Navarre. And that's through the Bourbon connection.
We're going up, over, and down to get to Henry of Bourbon or Henry of Navarre.
So this is like, so Catherine's just like, this is not playing out like she had planned when she had 9 children. The fact that there's like, she has no there's no Valois to become the heir to the throne. So she's like, fuck me. So she's now 59 years old in terms of just like life events per year. Like I don't know. Sometimes I get to this point in a story and I'm like, she was now 21, but 59 feels like, okay, a reasonable age considering how much has happened. So she's like, great. Okay. So the heir to the throne is a Huguenot. This is complicating things.
This is not working at all how I wanted it to.
Anyway, so then she had a face-to-face meeting with the Huguenot leaders, and that kept things peaceful for a while, but then some of the Catholics got mad at her for being nice. I'm sure by some Catholics, I mean the de Guises.
De Guises.
Yeah, and so this is where we get the Catholic League. Can you explain what that is? Do you know what that is?
It's, okay, so going back to the Marie de Guise episode is like the de Guises they were cardinals. They had a bunch of cardinals. They were also related to the Lorraines, the Duke of Lorraine, which was not part of France at the time. And so they had like the Catholic parts of Germany kind of on their side as well, which of course wasn't Germany at the time. It was the Holy Roman Empire. They were dealing with their own Gustavus Adolphus situation. Which he shows up in one of our favorites, Christina. So like there's all that fun stuff going on, but they aligned themselves with a bunch of the few Catholic places left and said, hey, we're going to be a team now and we're going to fight Protestants, by which I mean we're going to fight Huguenots. and Spain, come help us. France, come help us. Random Germans, come help us.
It's like Avengers Assemble, but for Catholics. They're just...
And in charge will be the de Guises.
Guess. Surprise.
Because they're so good at killing Huguenots.
Well, you know what? They've been doing it a long time.
Kind of their thing.
Yeah. So the Catholic League is kind of everybody except for King Henry. And it's like all the Catholic people except for him somehow.
I mean, it's technically, it starts out with him as well. Like it kind of starts out with him in it, and then he like pulls away.
And then they go to war against him.
And then this is the War of the Three Henrys.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows how I feel, and I think everyone feels the same way, where it's just like, people in history, choose a new name. Choose a different name. Why do you all have the same name? Stop it. It makes everything so complicated. So we have the three Henrys. So who are the three Henrys? We've got Henry of Navarre.
Henry of Navarre, Henry de Guise.
Oh, Henry de Guise, and then Henry the King. So it's three people all call Henry.
Yeah. So it's Bourbon, de Guise. Like at this point, they're just literally at war with each other.
And they're all called Henry. But the secret weapon that Henry the King has is his mom, Catherine. So Henry...
But not her poison.
Tragically. So King Henry took charge of the negotiation to end the war, which was a terrible idea because he was a useless person. This ends with him going in hiding and leaving Catherine to sort out everything. Like, Mom, fix it. So here's a sentence I wrote. Between France and England and Spain, Catholics and Protestants, basically all of Western Europe was in a mess, and the only thing keeping France from imploding was Catherine's force of will. So things were going pretty badly for her as well. So there was... Here's what I want to say. This is going to air a couple weeks after we record it. But as we record this, there are currently riots on the streets in Paris. The people of Paris, like, their rioting skills are unmatched, I think. They're
professionals.
Like, generation after generation.
It's art.
It's like, you know, it's the French Revolution, it's Les Mis, it's everything that's happening in this story. It's just like the people of Paris are just like, is it time for a revolution? Like, let's do it.
Garbage on the streets.
So much like today.
Garbage on the streets.
So it's
rule number 1, garbage on the streets.
I haven't seen a video of somebody wheeling a guillotine down the street, but I'm sure someone has. Like, the people in Paris are just like, they're pros at it. They're, you know, all respect to the people rioting in Paris.
And the firefighters always side with the rioters. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
So it's like it's firefighters versus police.
You know what? I don't know. It's the streets of Paris riot, and they're like, I feel like they've always been rioting, and I feel like I don't know.
My favorite thing on TikTok right now are when they show the rioters like rioting in the streets, and they're like, oh, let's go grab a bite. And then they just go into a restaurant, and inside the restaurant is just people dining. Yeah. And then they leave and they're back to rioting. Like, it's like, let's stop and eat. And they're all civilized and cultured and fancy French people. And then they leave again. And then they're fight to the end for our rights French people. And they're both the same person. And I love them for it, even though they're French.
That's the professionalism of it. It's like, they're so good. Like, they riot. They know how to pace themselves. They know when they need to eat, take a break.
Work-life balance.
Yeah. You know, go in, have a baguette, go back out.
And I love, my absolute favorite thing though is like, there's like eating outside cafe style, and like in the cafe everybody's just quietly talking, and then like just over the line of garbage is just people screaming at each other and lighting things aflame. And it's like, yes, exactly. Like, don't give up your rights to anybody. Like, I don't know why we don't do that more, except, you know, Puritans and Germans just like, even the Germans are better rioters than we are.
Yeah.
And we have
I mean, in some ways it's remarkable that America had a revolution to begin with.
Well, and our ancestors like skipped the labor revolution. And so like we didn't really bring that down with us. And that's sad. Like, we had a labor revolution, don't get me wrong. And we did have riots, and we did have, but it was much quieter. And we're so spread out that we don't have the same culture of riot and strike throughout. It's centralized in certain areas.
And the French have a flair to it that I appreciate.
They do.
Although I will say, like, starting with our beloved Caroline of Brunswick, like the way that her funeral turned into a riot, like London has some good riot DNA as well. So shout out to the rioters of London.
When they do it right.
They do.
When they do it, they do it right.
When there's like a football match victory, people in England, Scotland, like they can fuck shit up.
Oh! If you're talking football, American can do that. Like, American riot properly.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But it's American football.
No, Philadelphia, how they grease the poles, but then people still climb the poles.
Okay, so but there's a cultural tradition for that. Like pole greasing, pole grease climbing is I think one of their Italian neighborhoods has traditional greased pole climbing matches. So greasing the poles just makes it more fun in Philadelphia. I don't know why they do that. They're just making it a better time.
Yeah.
They need like Elizabethan collars.
Like, listeners, here's what we're saying. I'm pro riot. So one day, if the Tits Out Brigade, you know what? I love a flying squadron. I love I love a riot. I love having a baguette in a cafe, then going back to the riot. Like, I love chaos. So at this point, there were riots in the streets of Paris, but I feel like that's every day in the last 30 years of Paris history in this story. So again, today the riots on the streets of Paris, like in this story, 1589, was because everybody had turned, much like today, they've turned against Macron. Everybody had turned against King Henry because he was a shitty king, and they all noticed finally. And he had run into hiding.
But he's like, oh no, it's my mom. He literally goes, oh no, it wasn't me, it was my mom.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, it was.
But it also was him. Like, if he'd done anything at all, maybe there'd be a chance. But he can't blame anything on his mother when he literally just gave it all to her.
Oh, I want to mention something that it's not in my notes, but I was reading it in this book yesterday, and I want to mention. So throughout this, like, time period we've been talking about, like Catherine's sons being teenagers and then adults, she kept flinging them at Elizabeth I and being like, do you want to marry this one? Do you want to marry Charles? Like, I know he's 9 and you're 35. Do you want to marry him? And Elizabeth is like, no. But there's like so many letters back and forth. This is the dual biography of Catherine and Elizabeth. And I see why she did it, because they had a lot of letters back and forth. And then Charles died, and Catherine's like, do you want to marry Henry? He's even better. He's even more handsome. He's 19. You're 45. Like, do you want to do this? And Elizabeth's like, no.
He's already married, but we can take care of that.
The closest that Catherine got to marrying Elizabeth to one of her sons was other Francis, who Elizabeth called the Frog. Like, he went over, they actually got along really well. I think he was kind of like, he was a good time, other Francis.
Even though he's like 5 years old and she's 80.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, what is the point of marrying them at this point when no one's going to have any children? But maybe the point was that he would then...
Alliances.
Exactly. So if Catherine could get sort of like a French-English thing going on because she was against Spain, she was like, Elizabeth, you're against Spain also. Let's just like team up.
Well, Elizabeth's a Protestant. And so that kind of like, that might neutralize some of the Huguenot thing if they're married into a Protestant family as well. Like everything's political with Catherine. She can always find an angle.
But she tried for, I think, 30 years to get Elizabeth to marry one of her sons. And it was increasingly unhinged, the things that she like. But Elizabeth did get along with other Francis. She called him the Frog. They were pals. In the movie with Cate Blanchett, he's played by Vincent Cassel, and they combine his character with Henry because they show him cross-dressing. Anyway, so this book claims, Estelle Perrin's book says that the closest Catherine got to marrying Elizabeth to any of her sons was marrying her to other Francis. And that was the closest Elizabeth came to marrying anybody. But of course, this did not work out because, of course, Elizabeth famously didn't marry anybody, not least of which Catherine de Medici's teenage son. So Catherine at this point had a lung infection. So she was ill, which meant that Henry stepped up, which was bad news because he was not smart. So he basically fired her from her role as like government of France. And then he set about with what I call the worst plan ever, which was to basically murder the de Guises.
I mean, a little late.
He did kill one of them, but that didn't do anything other than murder one person. This didn't help solve the ongoing religious wars that were threatening to destroy all of France. And then Catherine died of pleurisy. Is that what we've talked about before?
No. Pleurisy is an infection of the lining around your lungs. And basically, like, have you ever gotten a really, really, really bad cold or pneumonia or something?
And you just feel the pressure, yeah.
Every time you cough, it feels like razor blades.
Okay, I've not, but that sounds awful.
That's pleurisy.
Okay.
It's not fun. One of my coworkers had it, and it was like, I've had it before, but like one of my coworkers had it, and she's like, this is the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. So like, it's legit a terrible thing. But if that lining swells up too much, it's really, really hard to breathe. So it's not dissimilar to dying of tuberculosis, but it's a completely different disease.
Yeah. And she I'm sure she tried all the witchcraft and poison-based thing, egg whites, herbs, soothsayers.
Anything she could.
I'm sure, just like when she was trying to get pregnant, she tried everything she could. But anyway, so she died of pleurisy, January 5th, 1589. But because Paris was still rioting and was under siege by her enemies, her body couldn't be properly buried in the traditional royal family area. So years later, her remains were moved to the Saint Denis Basilica in Paris. And then because every French person I've ever talked about on this podcast, this happened to them during the French Revolution. The revolutionaries just went to the royal graveyards and just started throwing bones around. So a revolutionary mob tossed her bones during the French Revolution into a mass grave with those of other kings and queens. So, because Paris is going to riot, that's what's up.
There's nowhere safe for you, even if you're dead.
No, exactly. Not if you were a queen. So then I just have a couple notes about her legacy. So you mentioned her family / her, she was a great patron of the arts, just because that was kind of the Medici thing, but also for PR reasons, because her son's reigns were spent just keeping the monarchy existing. So any buildings or works of art that glorified the royal family was good for her and for that, and for people to be like, okay, yeah, the Valois dynasty, we respect it. She also oversaw numerous great festivities at court. I mentioned before that she brought ballet. She was introduced ballet to France, drama, music, dance. She also really loved architecture. She oversaw the construction of several palaces and great houses. And that was part of why it hurt her so much when her husband let Diane live in the Chateau de Chenonceau, because that was the most beautiful place. So that was why that was one of the first things she did. She kicked Diane out and then took over that chateau because she wanted to be there herself. She was known to entertain magicians and astrologers at court, perhaps even necromancers. Nostradamus, the well-known spiritualist and main character in season 1 of Reign, where he's played very sexily, sexy Nostradamus, was known to spend time with her at court. And so she was into spiritual stuff. And this did not do anything to lessen the rumors that she was a witch, because this is an era where being a witch, not a cool thing you want to be called. And the fact that she was hanging out with Nostradamus and maybe necromancers and doing stuff with poisons, she had chemistry experiments. It was seen as very suspicious, especially because people from Florence / anywhere in what we now consider Italy were considered to be oh, they do poisonings there. And to be fair, they did. So people just assumed that.
But Elizabeth also had, Elizabeth had John Dee. Catherine had Nostradamus. These are some of the biggest occult leaders. It was not unusual for a queen to have her own pet occultist.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was a lot, partially it's the xenophobia of her being from away just made her inherently more suspicious. And I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's people who've written about Queen Elizabeth and people, I don't know if anyone would have dared to call Queen Elizabeth a witch. And now we're just going to take a break for a word from our sponsors.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Contained herein are the heresies of Redolf Buntwine, erstwhile monk turned traveling medical investigator. Join me as I study the secrets of the divine plagues and uncover the blasphemous truth that ours is not a loving God, and we are not its favored children. The heresies of Redolf Buntwine, wherever podcasts are available.
People often look at me with confusion when I ask them what their only one in the room story is. They think it has to be like mine, where I went to a 600-person event and discovered that I was the only Black person there. I know. Horrifying, right? Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I am the host and creator of the podcast Only One in the Room. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's only one story. This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone.
I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
We're the Ghost Story Guys.
And every 2 weeks, we explore first-person stories of encounters with the paranormal from all around the world.
Then we have some fun reacting to those stories. We like to say our goal is to scare the hell out of you, then make you laugh.
Belief in the paranormal is not required. All you need is a love of great storytelling and curiosity about the world around you.
Come find the Ghost Story Guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts live, or at ghoststoryguys.com.
And we're back.
I was reminded this week that like Nostradamus there was a big moment in the 90s where like Nostradamus came back and all of his predictions, because there was like a presumption of a prediction about the millennium and the Y2K bug and all that stuff. So like it was, I just remember Nostradamus had a really big moment in the 90s where everybody was trying to attribute things to Nostradamus.
I do remember that, where they're just being like, he was right about everything, like in these vague statements about various stuff.
And then Y2K happened and everybody stopped talking about Nostradamus.
Well, it was similar to the same thing. What was it? The Mayan calendar allegedly said the world was going to end in 2012 or something.
Yeah, and that's just because Europeans can't do math.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do remember that Nostradamus trend. Catherine was also interested in astronomy, which was one of her great interests. And she was also very well educated as like growing up as a person. So she was, and that's maybe where part of her cleverness, her like brilliance, like she would have read about other leaders and what to do. And like she pivoted and like in a series of like really strokes of bad luck, and she kept surviving. So, you know, she was resilient, certainly. And that's Catherine de Medici. Do you have any other, like, we're going to get into the scoring, but do you have any other like fun facts that you want to bring up?
The Tuileries Palace, I know I'm saying that wrong, and I apologize. Tuileries. There's no, the S at the end obviously is silent. So Tuileries, that palace in Paris, right on the Seine, that's one of her building projects.
It reminds me the building of things like to really consolidate your power. It reminds me of like, and she probably like learned this from her family, but also it's like, you know, the ancient Romans would do that, to be like, okay, we're taking over the city and we're going to build all these beautiful things. And it, you know, it just makes us look more powerful. Like there's such a long history of people making buildings that are nice buildings to just, it's akin to coin minting, to just be like, look, it's official. I am in charge here.
Look at the great things that I can do for you. Just let me stay in charge.
Something I want to mention about her that I also read in the Estelle Prank biography yesterday was, after Henry died, the custom was that she would wear black for the rest of her life, and she did. Which is why in the movie Queen Margot,
creepy gremlin.
In Queen Margot, she is played by Verna Lisi, who is an Italian actress, and her face color, if you listen to the Lady Jane live stream, her foundation color is like Lana and myself as teenagers using literal clown makeup as foundation, which is a thing both Lana and I did, which is another reason we were destined to be friends. But in the movie Queen Margot, Verna Lisi, she looks like Nosferatu. Like she's so pallid. Like they make her look like a skeleton face person. She's wearing these black, huge collars. She's just like lurking in balconies in the back shadowy corners of rooms. It's a fantastic performance. But I just thought that was interesting that she wore black for the rest of her life, which is also a Queen Victoria vibe.
Yeah.
But it's interesting too because of the Huguenot thing. You know, they would wear plain black, but I'm sure Catherine de Medici was wearing black with like black on black on black, like lace, gloves, like embellishment, like fancy black. She's like, I'm not like them. I'm wearing black, but it's fashion.
She embraced her French after a while.
She did. She did. And it's just interesting to me too that she, I think at the time and also like right after and to today, like she still thought of as like, oh, that Italian woman, you know, even though she was like basically Queen of France for a really long time. But it's like, but she's actually from Italy.
Half French, lived in France from 15 to onward, was the Queen of France, was the effective ruler of France for half of her life, the Italian woman. None of her relatives cared about her. Like after she became Queen of France, she didn't have like Mary had the de Guises there, like knocking on her door. Nobody, like the Medicis had their own problems. Now the irony is Henry of Navarre married a Medici.
Oh, that's right, didn't he? Marie, right?
Mm-hmm, a cousin.
And did he not, when he became King of France, Henry of Navarre, he switched to Catholic, right? Because like the Bourbon kings, like they were all Catholic.
Yeah,
he went, which I'm sure was quite shocking to a lot of people and probably caused some riots, I presume. That's right, yeah. And honestly, until you brought up the Medicis again, I was like, that's right, because she was from this really powerful family. Like they arranged, like Uncle Pope, her other Uncle Pope, like they arranged her marriage to Prince Henry, and then they just kind of like fucked off. They're just like, okay.
Yeah.
She's there now and we're busy doing Pope shit.
She's not our kid. So why not?
We wash our hands of her. She's fine. But yeah, it's the way that she's still talked about is like that Italian woman. Like it's the way that like race was not a construct in the same way then as it is now. So it was very much a national thing. It's like, where are you from? Not what color is your skin. And she was from Florence. And, well, I guess French people are still, I mean, all love to people in French, especially the rioters, people in France. But they're kind of known for being xenophobic still, I think, right? French people are very much like, we are French, you're not. That's kind of one of the stereotypes about them.
Well, and it's really, really telling that they call her the Italian woman when Italy wasn't really a thing until the late 1800s.
Yeah.
Like Tuscany was still owned by the Habsburgs during the Sisi era. So like we're talking like basically 1900s where there's such a thing as a nation of Italy. So they're lumping together a whole bunch of very disparate, not connected places into one pile and calling her that's the xenophobia. That's like the othering of her, because they're not giving her she's from Florence. She's the Florentine woman. She's the Italian woman. And so they're like, even in Alexander Dumas' time, Italy isn't a thing like it is today. And so it's very, very interesting that's the phrase that gets picked for her.
But also I think it's like, if she hadn't been from there, they would have been like, she's the whatever woman, you know. It's like Elizabeth I. It's like you look at a powerful woman in history and it's like, well, what can we call her out for? It's like Elizabeth I. It's like, well, she's actually illegitimate. You know, it's like you just find it's like, and if she wasn't, then to be like, yeah, but she's got red hair. Like you would just find something where you're just like, yeah, but she's short. Like there's always something to have that like ad hominem attack. Yeah.
There's always something
to be able to dismiss some. She's big nose. Like and with Catherine, it was just easy because she was from another country technically. So we talked to the people listening 2 episodes ago, probably, about I don't have a math brain. And that's what I say, like when I am entering the scores for people, I don't know how they add up until they add up at the end. So I'm not giving people scores planning or hoping for any specific thing at the end. Lana, I think your brain might work differently. So we're just going to score her and see where she lands. So it's first, I think I know the answer, but I'll ask you. Was there anyone in the story who was a supportive and good friend to her who would get the Lady Jane Seymour Memorial Award for Outstanding Supporting Performance? Was there anyone? Anyone? No. There was not.
She has no, even her daughters hated her.
Yeah, the flying squadron weren't friends. They were just her like employees. And I think they were quite disposable to her. Maybe Nostradamus, but we didn't get into that.
But Nostradamus was an employee. Like he was not a buddy. There's no friends in evil politics.
No, there's truly not. If I had a scale, maybe I'll start one day of like most villainous villains. Like I think the De Guises en masse could go on that list. Like worst nemesis of a person.
Worst nemesis. Yeah. I don't know that they were way eager to be massacring. I don't know if they were like full on villains. They were just not good people, and they had a very severe agenda.
It's more like antagonist. It's more like
antagonist. They were definitely
like if we're looking at her as a protagonist, they were every step of the way just messing up her plans, whether it's like what they were doing when Mary Queen of Scots was the Queen of France, or every time they started doing a religious massacre. It's just like she's trying to do stuff and you keep massacring Huguenots.
But calling her a protagonist is also generous, because she was not like in favor of the people of France. She was in favor of ways to keep power.
Yeah, and for herself and
like she was not a good person.
No, we're not here. We're not being like, yeah, Catherine de Medici, girl boss, hero. And
I mean, she was a girl boss, but she was like girl boss in the way girl boss girl was girl boss.
No, exactly. She's like very much like gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss.
Yes.
Like there's things that I admire in her, certainly, but I'm not being like, wow, what a hero. Like, and I hope no one thinks I've ever said that about anyone on this podcast, because that's not what I'm here for. But what an interesting story. What a weird person. What an impressive series of things she did. So on a scale of 0 to 10, Lana. So the first category is scandaliciousness, which is not just how scandalous do we think she was, but like at the time, how scandalous did people, like in the context of who she was around, how scandalous was what she did, do you think?
I mean, there's so many factors in this, because it was like she did things that full on got people to think she was a witch, and she just kept doing them like her entire life.
True. She could have stopped doing that, but she didn't.
She could stop playing with poison. She could have stopped hanging out with Nostradamus. She could have stopped talking to occultists. And she's like, no, this is a thing, and this is what I'm doing, and you're just going to accept it because I'm me and you're you.
Yeah. And she had the flying squadron. Like she had a league of sexy lady spies.
And she never stopped vying for control, from gaslighting her own children through starting a freaking war with other parts of France.
Yeah. And then also just the way that she, when Francis died, and she was just like, here's what is happening. I am now the government of France.
I mean, she's not, like, a lot of times when you think of scandalous, you think sexy scandalous. She was not sexy scandalous. She was every other kind, like, every other, like the TV show scandalous.
Yes.
She was like, what do you mean I've been committing war crimes and you figured it out finally?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't put it past her to have poisoned at least a few of those people. I just think that if she was a full-on poisoner, that was her go-to, that the diseases would have been hit first.
Yeah, there were some people who, like, exactly. Like, it was her son who was just like, I'm off the leash. I'm just going to do my own thing. And his first order of business was to kill a de Guise.
Yeah. Like, she may have been holding them back for all we know. It's like, no, we can't just kill people because we don't agree with them. It just makes things more complicated.
Well, and then in terms of like how people saw her at the time, and that's what we've been trying to parse out, is, how much was like, I'm not going to give her any points for being from Florence, even though people found that scandalous, or in retrospect, when the Bourbons were putting out their propaganda, they were being like, oh, she was like a crazy witch. It's like, no, but like herself in her era, like was, I think, I don't know. I'm going to, what do you think? What do you think for her scandaliciousness?
I want to give it a high number, just because like gaining power from powerful men who had legitimate claims, the Regency, and then maintaining that through the adulthood of her children.
And And the scandalousness is like that. Some of that can be scheminess points as well. For scandalous, it's like, and how did people feel about that? And I think people are just like, what the fuck is happening?
I believe the massacres speak for themselves.
Yeah. How did the people feel about that? Well, let's ask the rioting masses of murdered Huguenots. I do think it's a high score. How high? I'm not sure.
It's like the layers of people, like at the noble level, she was terrible. She was horribly scandalous.
Well, and I think they found her scandalous because she was like from Florence, the fact that I don't know. Well, and then I'm thinking about the fact that like we know, like it was so interesting to people that she like got the mistress to help her get pregnant. Like, so that's a bit of sort of a sex scandal.
That is sex scandal. There is like you're supposed to be mad at the mistress, and no, you're helping, like you're working together. So I'm gonna say like an 8, and you can pull me up or down.
I'm gonna say 7.5.
Good, let's do it.
And I'm only taking off the 0.5 because she for sure was scandalicious. But so much of it is colored by people who hated her, making her out to be even more scandalicious. So I'm just taking off the 0.5 because she wasn't. If she did everything people said, that it would be a higher number.
But arguably, the fact that they're saying so much, that's what leans into the scandalous more than the sneakiness. I'm cool with whatever you want to do, but I just want to point out that, like, even to this very day, people are making shit up about her because she was so much.
It's true. It's true.
Which implies a level of scandaliciousness that deserves not to be low.
No, it's true. It's true. You know what? I'm gonna go with an 8. I think you're right. I'm gonna go with an 8. For a minute, I was like 7.75, but no, you're right. Because scandaliciousness is how did people think about her at the time? And she was doing shit that was scandalous, and people thought that it was. So that's what scandaliciousness is. Scheminess. I mean, I think a 10.
Like that's a 10.
Have you been like, if you're still here with us, whatever, 3 hours in?
She ruined the whole world with her scheminess. I've told you, I've explained this to you. You have to listen to me.
Yeah. No, it's the scheminess, but also sort of a scheminess, but part of it's in a petty way because she's just like, fuck you, DeGeezus. Like, I don't care if this marriage would make my son.
If it weren't for her, there would be no Napoleon.
There'd be no FBI. But the fact that she was like, she wanted power for herself so much that she just like fucked things up for Mary Queen of Scots. But also the fact that she wanted power for herself so much that she just like raised these children to be her like little pawns. And I mean, everything she did, like the way that she took power. When her husband died, she kicked out Diane. When her son died, she like became the government. Like when her adult son became king, she was like, I'm still in charge though. Like she had everything lined up for any contingency.
She gives me very extreme, like Logan Roy and Catherine de Medici are I don't see any differences in this picture. In Succession. Logan Roy's from Succession. He's the father that they're trying to succeed. And he's literally never going to give up an ounce of power. And he's going to use all of their scheming against them. Like that is the same energy. There are no differences in this picture.
No, it's like this. No, everything. Like, if you want to know why we just gave her a 10 for scheminess, it's like re-listen to this entire series of episodes.
I believe I have made my points.
Okay, this is a challenging one. So significance. Because we talked about without her actions, all of world history would be different.
I think again, Caroline of Brunswick is one of my favorites. And Cece is one of my favorites, but their significance is very low. Like I can make arguments for different points of things that they did, but this is like, I can't even begin to explain how important she was in the course of history, even without my sliding glass doors conspiracy theories moment. Like the war with the Huguenots, the end of the Valois line, the Huguenots, a large number of the Huguenots came to America around this period and started settling in America, and that contributed to some of the aesthetic of the South.
If you think about the artistic stuff too, it's like she brought ballet to France. Like that alone is pretty significant. Like the number of buildings she built, the architecture. I mean, it's not just like we know her name now, but her legacy, like she did wildly significant stuff.
she introduced the concept of patronage into France. And imagine, like, even how much the Bourbons hated her, the salon culture of France, the art of Versailles, and wanting to build palaces that are bigger and more impressive and more huge. Like, that is the culture she brought into France with her not her Italianness, but her Medici-ness. And her cousin also had an influence on that, but not nearly to the same degree. So I want to go, like, I'm not going lower. I would not go lower than a 9, but I will take what you like. You can convince me otherwise.
I mean, just everything you're saying and just thinking it through in my head, like this category, like I cannot think of a way that a person could have been more significant.
I just can't.
Like we've talked on the show before about people where it's like, oh, well, because of her, like her son did this, so like we'll give her points. Or it's like she, you know, if it was somebody and if all she did was bring ballet to France, I'd be like, oh, that's a 5. You know, like she was so consequential.
Like she level of significance, like at very least.
Yeah, that's true, Lana, but I don't know what I gave her because, as you know, I don't track these things.
Of course you don't. That would be too easy for me. But that's who we're on par with. Like these are people that like changed the course of their society.
Yeah. Like how high would you go?
I mean, I would say I'm saying at least a 9.
I think.
But if you want to go different, you tell me.
The only way I could see her, I don't know, I'm like if she had personally invaded Portugal or something, it's like if she was like, but she but that wasn't her vibe. That wasn't what she was able to do. She just like from behind the scenes manipulated and got people to do things that I think I'll agree with you on a 9 because a lot of the things she did were significant in retrospect. At the time, she couldn't have known the long-term effects of what she's doing. She was just trying to keep herself in power. It's just those things happened to then.
She was not aiming for significance.
No, she's not Napoleon. You know, she's not being like, people will remember my name. She's like, no, like I am going to have power no matter. And it just happened that the things that she did were significant. So, and that's the only reason I'm going to give her a 9 and not a
10. She's not a Genghis Khan.
Exactly. And then I think an area in which she may not get as high a score is the sexism bonus. Because, okay, so pro sexism bonus is like she was, you know, like so many people, she was sold off into a marriage to a man who treated her badly. She did not have power, but then she did, is the thing. Like how much more power could she have had there not been the patriarchy?
If she'd been king and she hadn't had to deal with any of this and her kids could just, you know, go around having more kids all the time. Like if it was her instead of Henry, if her, then she could have had another wife. She could have had more kids. She could have ensured her legacy. But because she was the queen, she couldn't do that. So she was stuck with what she had. And then she had to fight men for every ounce of power she got. And then she had to maintain it. So I'm like, I know this is created as more of a, you know, because you're just a woman, you couldn't have done as much. But like, this kind of goes within Marie de Guise, Margaret Tudor, like because she's a woman and everyone was fighting her every ounce of the way.
How much more could she have thrived?
Like there would not have been these problems because the de Guises would never have had any sort of influence. They would never have gotten so big that they thought they could start massacring people. Because if she'd been a man, like I'm leaving this one to you because you're the one who knows your bonuses, but I just want to make that very clear point of had she been the husband, had she been the man, she could have been as schemy as she wanted to be. She could have controlled everybody and there wouldn't have been as many men trying to ruin it every step of the way because her sons were weak and they were in her influence. They had the ability to gain that influence and that control, these dukes, and think that they had a chance of stepping in.
It's interesting the way that you're describing it because, yeah, it's like, you know, if she was like some other people on the show where it's like if there'd been more men around her who were able to just be like, we're just going to lock you in a tower for 30 years, you know, then it's easy to be like, well, that's a high score for sexism. But it's like if she had been able to just like thrive and not have to use 50% of her energy to just be like, shut the fuck up and listen to me. Like, how much more could she have accomplished? Like, she accomplished a lot.
And while you think, I just want to point out that Mary Queen of Scots does at one point get herself thrown into a tower and she never stops fighting, which I attribute a lot to Catherine de' Medici more than I do any of the others, because she saw that she was able to grow up with somebody who's like, I'm in a tower, so what tools do I have around me? Like, I don't think being thrown in a tower would have stopped Catherine.
That's fair. Yeah, and it's true. Like the people who get like a high sexism score for that sort of thing, it's like Sophia Dorothea or somebody who just like had no way out, and that just sucks. And I wanted to give her some points for something. What about so hard?
You don't have to give any. I just want to. I like making my case.
No, I think sexism bonus. What about 8.5?
Oh wow. Okay.
Is that more than you would think?
I take it. No, I think she's the best, so I will take it.
No, you're convincing with your had she been king, how much more could she have done had she not been certain? But oh my god, it's 35.5. This is a recurring score. That's 0.5 more than Sushi, just so you know.
Yeah, that puts her in the top 10. That's all I was going for.
No, it absolutely does. I'm just inputting her into my Google document. Haha. Yeah. So in terms of, if you want to see the full scandaliciousness scale, you can go to vulgarhistory.com and you click on scores and you can see it all there. But so Fredegund has 38. Catherine's, and again, these scores are chaotic and it depends what mood I'm in. Catherine's own daughter, Queen Margot, has 37.5. And I suspect that's because Queen Margot got more for scandaliciousness because she was like taking lovers, flailing.
She was buying people's heads.
Yeah, like she had, yeah, exactly. Manuela Sanz is 37 and Jinga is 36. Harem Sultan 36. And then the 35.5 club is Catherine de' Medici, Le Chevalier d'Eon, Malintzine, and Queen Min all have a 35.5.
That is, I will accept all of that as like her peers.
Exactly. And then so she has 35. Like she's just 0.5 below. Yeah, I truly like. I knew that this was going to be a high score, and I'm really happy to have a new entry in the top 10, the first top 10 entry of the season. You know how I know? Because I'm color coding it on my Google Doc. There's a lot of turquoise. That was last season. Like the top 10 is almost entirely people from the International season because like I got a lot of really interesting people there. But
they were the best.
Yeah, so that's great, Lana. I mean, I predicted this would be, I set aside 3 hours for this conversation, and we're basically just coming up on that.
It's exactly what I set aside too. So we know ourselves and we know our love and obsession with Catherine.
Exactly. And there's so much to get into. And I'm so grateful that you were here to get into all the parts that I didn't know as much about, like her family.
Why the de Guises were so terrible.
Somebody said, I think it was one of the Instagram comments, was because I was saying, like, should I get the Where's Your God Now, John Knox? Should I make that merch? And then somebody said, you should also do one that says, de Guise, keep de Guising, or something like that.
Yes! Oh my God, I need that too.
Which is apparently a thing that you and I said numerous times in the Marie de Guise episode.
If that's my legacy, I accept it and embrace it.
Yeah. Lana, can you please remind everybody, if you know all of your fans, how they can support you by buying your books and things?
You can buy my books wherever you can order books online at this point. I have one book called Technically You Started It that is two nerdy teenagers slowly falling in love as they talk about Nixon and Canada. And the other one is Speak for Yourself, which is an academic decathlon fanfic where they study the second and the Gilded Age, Second Industrial Revolution era. And so, yes, I make history into my cute little YA rom-coms. And you can find me also... Oh, you can also find me on lanawoodjohnson.com and that will tell you how to find me on the internet.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say I do love that you've written these two cute YA rom-coms that are so sweet and so nice. And just in them, because you're you, there's these like historical, it's just like, well, what would they talk about here? Well, what about wallpaper of the wallpaper design?
How the wallpaper could kill you.
Yeah. So, you can read those books and you also just like learn some historical trivia along the way, which like now everybody has listened to you for several hours.
It's exactly what it's like to be friends with me.
Exactly. We get into all of these things. So Lana, thank you so much for this. You are going to be returning for one more episode coming up. Anyway, we're going to be doing the Queen Charlotte episode.
Yes, we are.
I'm calling it Bridgerton adjacent.
Because I am the George III whisperer as well.
Yeah, everything I know about, well, George III, but also America. So, I want to let you know what's going on in the next episodes to come. Because what we've been doing this season so far, just to make sure that you have at least one, if not two episodes every week, just to make the workload work best for me so I can bring you the best episodes I'm able to. Between the Mary Queen of Scots episodes, I'm doing super special interviews with various authors or other academics and experts. And so there's something special coming up on Friday, if you're listening to this like the day that it came out. So this upcoming weekend, the new Netflix series Queen Charlotte is coming out. That's the Bridgerton spinoff. And so I was curious to learn more about the real Queen Charlotte, but also the other issues that like swirl around her life. Like Queen Charlotte, the new series, as well as Bridgerton, presents her as a Black woman. And that's a whole discussion that I wanted to learn more about. Anyway, it's not my area of expertise, and that's why I've brought in guest experts. So on Friday, I'm going to be talking with two historians who specialize in various aspects of the story of the real Queen Charlotte. So that's going to be a special discussion of kind of Queen Charlotte and her family tree and how she's seen today. That's coming out on Friday. Next week, I'm going to be doing a special episode of Vulgar History, covering the life of actual Queen Charlotte. So just kind of, it's exciting to me whenever there's a new movie or a TV show or anything that talks about the life of a woman from history. And so I like to, if you're like me, when you see these movies or you hear about them, you're like, wait, but who is the real person? So anyway, we're pausing the American Scott stuff to do some Queen Charlotte stuff coming up. Then the week after that, there's going to be more super specials, some books I'm really excited about. One of which ties into another woman from history that everyone is kind of discourses swirling around, which is Cleopatra. So there's going to be Cleopatra content the next week. And then the week after that, which is May 24th. Mark it on your calendars. That's when we're going to get the next There's Something Mary Queen of Scots episode, which is going to be about, spoiler, Mary Queen of Scots herself. So, I have to get that right. I really need to put in the time to really prepare for that. So anyway, lots of good vulgar history stuff coming up. And the next Mary Queen of Scots episode is going to be on May 24th. And another, update I just wanted to let you know is that I have changed the URL and the host for the merch store. So now how you can get to it is you go to vulgarhistory.com/store. We'll take you to the new store. So I'm using a platform that's called TeePublic, and I've heard from the previous store that I was using, which is Spring, there's just various issues. I heard from people in the Tits Out Brigade who had ordered merch, and then the orders got, not delivered or delivered late and things like that. And the whole point of the merch is just to make you guys laugh and wear, a shirt or a sticker that just confuses the people around you, and you can have a secret inside joke. Like imagine if you go into a coffee shop or something, someone opens their laptop, you see like a Goth Queen mom friend sticker on it. Oh my God, that's a fellow Tits Out Brigade member. Anyway, the whole point of the merch is just to make you happy, and the other site was just kind of not bringing that as much. So anyway, we're on TeePublic, and what's exciting about that is that there's new types of merch. I'm talking about lapel pins. I'm talking about magnets. I'm talking about wall art, notebooks, pillows, tapestries, laptop cases. There's lots more options, which is also really exciting. So all of the previous merch from the previous store is not yet migrated over, but everything that's there is merch that was designed by an artist, a human person who I compensated, who I paid to design this art. And that's important to me. in this era of AI to hire humans, to hire human artists and to pay them what they're worth. Anyway, I'm keeping in the store. Like, we finished the Tits Out for Trans Rights fundraiser that was in April, and I don't have the totals yet of how much money was raised for the Trevor Project and for Point of Pride, but I will have that in an upcoming episode, as well as shout outs to all the people who pledged. But I love the Tits Out Brigade coming together to help support trans rights. It's an important situation, and I appreciate those of you pledging who did. Anyway, I'm keeping the design in the store. The design by Jan Jupiter, the Chevalier d'Eon, where it says "We have always been here," because it's a beautiful piece of art. And now you can get it on a mug. You can get it on a magnet. Anyway, I'm keeping it in the store, and I'm going to keep sending any proceeds from the sales of that art. As long as it's in the store, I'm going to keep pledging or donating those to Point of Pride. So anyway, vulgarhistory.com/store. The link will be in the show notes if you want to peruse the merch. And yes, you can follow me and this podcast on Instagram at Vulgar History Pod, on TikTok at Vulgar History, where, you know, not to like toot my own horn, but I'm kind of killing it. There's like 5,000 people following me on TikTok. And for someone like me, a crone, you know, an aged millennial, it makes me feel young and with it. Anyway, I'm on TikTok, and so you can follow me there on TikTok at Vulgar History. And if you want to join the Patreon, that's at patreon.com/AnneFosterWriter, and that's where you can pledge a small monthly amount to get access to early and ad-free episodes of this podcast, as well as bonus episodes of Vulgar Piece Theater, where we talk about costume dramas from history. Most recently, we did one about Corsage, the Empress Sisi movie. We're going to be talking about The Woman King, the Viola Davis movie, again next, and Chevalier, the movie about Chevalier St. George. Anyway, we've been watching like good movies recently, which has been a nice change from some of the lower scoring ones we watched before. I also do episodes on there called So This Asshole, where I talk about men from history, but also, I don't know, when I find a man from history who's like not an asshole, or is an asshole in a good way, I'm not sure what to call it yet, but it's just kind of like, so these guys, I don't know. I had Alison Epstein was on, and we talked about Australian bushrangers, and it's such a good episode. I'm supposed to be reading about Mary Queen of Scots, but instead I've fallen down a bushranger wormhole, and I just can't stop reading about these like Australian vigilante like weirdos. Anyway, to hear all that stuff, it's on patreon.com/AnneFosterWriter. And yeah, the merch is at vulgarhistory.com/store. And anyway, I will talk to you guys in the next episodes. There's so many episodes coming out. Super specials. The Queen of Charlotte stuff is going to be this week and next week. And then Cleopatra stuff. And then Mary Queen of Scots, the star of the season, coming up towards the end of May. And I appreciate all of you listening to this podcast, and keep your pants on and your titties out. Vulgar History is hosted, written, and researched by Anne Foster and edited by Christina Lumagi.
Welcome to the small town of Chinook, where faith runs deep and secrets run deeper. In this new thriller, religion and crime collide when a gruesome murder rocks the isolated Montana community. Everyone is quick to point their fingers at a drug-addicted teenager, but local deputy Ruth Vogel isn't convinced. She suspects connections to a powerful religious group. Enter federal agent V.B. Laureau, who has been investigating a local church for possible criminal activity. The pair form an unlikely partnership to catch the killer, unearthing secrets that leave Ruth torn between her duty to the law, her religious convictions, and her very own family. But something more sinister than murder is afoot, and someone is watching Ruth.
Chinook, starring Kelly Marie Tran and Sanaa Lathan. Listen to Chinook wherever you get your podcasts.
Ah, the web tour. Those that both creators and were created by the threads disentangle from the fringes to feast on the very thing that spawned them.
What's that, Silly? This is how you deal with weird!
No! Do not harm my children! Oh, you lost a feather. Can I keep it?
No, you can't force me to!
Do you know what lies within nothing.
Rocket's in trouble, Akasa. Can we turn on the windshield remotely?
No, she could lose her job as an Akasar.
I don't fear Vehar.
No, but you fear me. If you intend to trick me, I will not hesitate to sever the oath bond entirely.
Why didn't you help me? Coward! I don't have a parachute! I don't like free falling!
Counterbalance, a high fantasy audio drama. Season 2, coming 15th of October 2023. Learn more on trilunas.com.